Hi, thank you for joining us. This is Shuffle Up and Deal. Like I said, I'm Joseph. I'm here with Enrique and Ethan. The three of us are embedded security consultants at IOActive. We do low-level code review, reverse engineering of low-level topics, operating systems, drivers, firmware, and we also do some specialized tooling development. Just a little bit about this research. I'm a mediocre poker player, and I like to pay attention to the poker scene a little bit. And there's a casino in Los Angeles called the Hustler Casino, and they run a live game on YouTube where they will stream heavy nosebleeds, deep stack games. Regularly, people have hundreds of thousands of dollars in front of them, and there was a very suspicious hand that was played with the two players on the screen. The player to the right, Robbie, she ended up calling off $100,000 with Jack high. It was very strange. So obviously the internet talked about it a lot, and it became a bit of discussion and speculation on potential cheating. So the casino went ahead and hired some independent investigators, and they released a report. And here in the report, in the middle, you see that they mention a card shuffler. And they gave it a low priority, but they also considered it highly complex as a target for cheating. So we saw that as a fun, target, a nice challenge. So, quickly went into the secondhand market, checked eBay, and we found these two shufflers. You have on the left the Shuffle Master Deckmate 1, and the right is the Deckmate 2, the more modern version. So why did we pick these shufflers? Well, they're just simply the most popular. If you enter any sort of poker room, casino, card room, if they have an electronic shuffler running a poker game, it's generally one of these models. It is also the official shuffler of the World Series of Poker. So the screenshot here is from the final table a few months ago. And you can see to the right of the dealer is a Deckmate 2 shuffler in that little podium. So just a quick high-level comparison. They do exactly what you think they do. They're configured to accept a single deck. It will shuffle it and then present it to the dealer. The Deckmate 1 is a bit more archaic. It's older. It does have some sort of security features, such as sensors to keep track of how many cards it has processed. So for example, in a poker game, you'll have it configured for 52 cards. So it will know if a player at the table pocketed, the ace of spades, and there's only 51 cards, it will alert the dealer. Now the Deckmate 2, it's a lot more modern. They added a lot more features. They also added an internal camera that will read the cards as they get shuffled, so they are aware of the suit and the rank of the cards. What this does is it allows them to be aware if they see duplicates, or also alert the dealer of the missing card. So in the event that a cheater were to maybe introduce a second ace of spades, so there's still 52 cards, they just exchange it with a different one, it would detect it and it would alert the dealer that, hey, the 7 of diamonds is missing and there's a second ace of spades, something's wrong. In addition to that, it shuffles significantly faster than the Deckmate 1. And it also supports a external display module that will mount to the poker table, so dealers can kind of touch configuration menus, have a player clock feature, things along those lines. So we would like to quickly showcase a demo. And what we'll do here is we have a webcam here showing the table. And we have a mobile application connected to our cheater's friend's cell phone. Is it not showing? Okay, we're not doing the demo until the AV people fix it. We'll go back to the slides. Worst case, we'll do it in the QA room for you. Essentially, what it was going to show is we have a cheater scenario where a cheater can sit at a table, and the way that the shufflers are mounted to the poker table is the bottom of it will be exposed. And the idea is that an attacker would plug in our case, a Raspberry Pi Zero, into the USB port. And that would log into the shuffler, modify the firmware on it, modify the code so that it would report back the data from the card. And then it would communicate to the cheater's cell phone. And then you could basically know the exact order of the decks. So going over these attack scenarios of how realistic is it and where are the threats of somebody actually attacking these devices. So looking at these pictures, you can see they're extremely complex. The internals have a lot of moving parts. There's a bunch of rubber belts, sensors, motors. A lot of things can go wrong. So due to that, regular maintenance needs to happen. I believe the manual said every 5 to 6 weeks of regular use, you would need somebody to go in and maybe replace some rubber belts. Anyways, the point is, a lot of people are going to be opening it up regularly to work on it. So if one of those maintenance employees have gone rogue and they decide to do something malicious, that's obviously a risk there. In addition, there are contractual service agreements that you enter with the manufacturer of the device when you purchase it, where they will allow their maintenance team to work on the shufflers if you're a licensed gaming environment. Now, in events that you're at a house game or let's say you're in the state of Texas and you're not running an actual casino, but you're running a card club and you charge a membership fee to join the card club, right? That's not a licensed gaming operator, and due to that, they have no sort of license agreement. So they're using third-party maintenance people. The next would be gaming operator employees. So obviously this can be from the top to the bottom, the owner of the area, the person running the game, all the way down to the dealer, the chip runners, the security guards. The shufflers end up moving in and out of a lot of hands. They go into a table, they get picked up, they get moved to a back room. And these attackers don't need the same depth of knowledge. All they really need is access to these external ports. So in this case, the Deckmate 2 has an external USB and Ethernet ports. So if they're in a back room and nobody's there, they're able to plug in a device and quickly compromise it and then put it out and play. That's a possibility. The one that's the most at risk for operators, we feel, is the attacker at a poker table. So, like I said earlier, based on the way that they're mounted, you can see the photo on the right is a poker table with cutouts. So the shuffler will be basically suspended by a metal lip, and the bottom is just exposed. Now, the reason this seems like a higher risk is because anybody can perform this attack, just a third-party person who's not associated with the casino at all, where their employees are generally vetted and go through background checks, etc. The next thing would be network access. So you saw the Ethernet port. We'll go into more detail about this later, but obviously unnecessary attack surface exposed over the network. If a casino employee or an attacker were to get onto that network, they could communicate with the device and potentially compromise it. In addition, some of these models are configured with a cellular modem. So they appear to offer some sort of pay-per-shuffle deal. It seems like that you can rent the shuffler out, and it will basically report back to the manufacturer to let them know how much they should charge you based on use. So if an attacker were able to get onto that cellular network or maybe set up their own rogue cellular network and get the device to connect to them, they could attack those network services. And Enrique is going to go ahead and cover some casino architecture and standards.
Okay. So yes, we're going to cover some of the specifications of the casino architecture. The reason we dived into this was because in the DM2, the Deckmate 2, we found a feature that ended up being something much larger. And we really like reading specs. So yes, this is how a modern casino floor looks like. Essentially, there are two main protocols, the G2S and S2S. The G2S is the protocol that EGMs, electronic gaming machines, and peripherals use to communicate with a floor system. And that floor system then uses S2S, or system to system, to communicate with some backend systems, right? Then this wasn't like this. In the past, each one of these machines could use their own custom proprietary protocol, and that led to issues related to compatibility, and it was hard to adapt to new requirements. So that's why the International Gaming Standards Association developed this. Now, G2S is an asynchronous XML-based protocol, runs over TCP, optional SSL. It allows to communicate with a single device or multiple device. It's looks like that. That's like a basic G2S message. And what's interesting about it is that in the specification, you can see different classes of functionalities defined. This, well, basically, you can think about it like in object-oriented programming, like interfaces. When a machine implements one of these, you know it exposes a set of methods and attributes, right? So we have interesting things here defined, like the download class allows to control the software of an EGM or a peripheral. You can download new games or do updates. The one that we found that it's interesting in the DM2 is called GATT. So GATT stands for Game Authentication Terminal. It's a protocol that allows regulators to determine if a machine is running the software that is intended to be running, right? So it authenticates the software. The way it works is this regulator will come and connect to the machine somehow, and it will have a list of known hashes or measurements. It will request what components that machine is available to perform a measurement on, and then we'll actually request the calculation of those measurements. And then it's going to compare. And if there is a mismatch, then it knows something bad happened. There are like different algorithms defined, and we can do this directly connecting to the machine, which is called serial GATT, which is what the Deckmate 2 supports through the serial port. And some EGMs apparently also supports network GATT, which is the same core protocol, but wrapped with HTTP, JSON, and potentially SSL, all these nice things that we like to use today. The core of the protocol, though, it's very simple. It's a 1-byte command, 1 byte length, 251 bytes of data at most, and a CRC. The commands that are defined are 4 for the master to send to the peripheral, and, well, 4 different responses. The one that we're interested in is the initiate authentication calculation query. With that, we can say something like, to the we as the master acts, and we require the EGM or peripheral to perform a calculation and then retrieves the measurements that it performed. Basically, we say, I want you to calculate all the measurements for the components that you have defined, and then you start polling with a status query. This is where the asynchronous portion comes in. And at the end, when it's finished, we just retrieve the whole result. An additional requirement of GATT is that in order to be G2S compliant, the EGM or peripheral should store all the transactions that are being performed. Again, this is to be compliant. With this, already we can say some things about the security of GATT. So the authentication seems flawed. This is trusting on the response of a compromised device, basically. If the EGM or the peripheral got already, if it was compromised, then the response can be 100% faked. There's no mentioning of public key infrastructure in the G2S specification or the GATT specification. So no certificates, no RSA, nothing. And what really, the idea of the GATT authentication is really attestation. So we haven't seen any concept related to TPM or root of trust, nothing like that. The algorithms that are defined, though, are either weak or not really suitable for cryptographic purposes. You can see here there are definitions for CRC16 and CRC32. So what do we find with shufflers and GATT? So for the DM1, which is, this is the Deckmate 2, but the DM1 does not implement any sort of GATT. So this means that if you're running a DM1, there's no way for a regulator to authenticate that software. It features something called history logs, where you can see some stats right there, but it's nothing related to the G2S transactions log like we saw before. Now, the DM2 has a basic GATT implementation. It's serial GATT only, so you have to be physically connected to the serial port. It's a HMAC SHA-1, and there's no transactions stored for the GATT itself, so this is not really G2S compliant. We can see here there are 4 components defined. So Deckmate 2 defined 4 components for which we can retrieve the measurements, or we can just retrieve them all at once. If we query the right file, this is again part of the specification. We can just bring them all at once, and then the auditor will check to see if there's a mismatch or not, right? Okay, Deckmate 1. This is how the Deckmate 1 looks like. It's the previous model. It features a smaller display, some messages with indications. It has 2 compartments. We will place the deck of cards in the first compartment at the top. Then the door will close, it will shuffle, and then a shuffle deck will come up when everything's ready in the second compartment. And from the back, you can see there's only exposes a serial port and the power supply. That serial port right there only allows you to retrieve the history log that we saw before, so nothing really fancy. But our goal with this was to retrieve how the operation worked for this device, understanding the shuffling algorithm and the RNG, essentially. So what we did is we extracted the ROM from the flash, and we just put that into IDA and started working. The MCU is an AT89S53 from Microchip. This is an Intel 8051 architecture. It's a hardware architecture, all 8-bit, and really fun to reverse if you get along with the carry bit. Of course, it was bare metal. No RTOS, no nothing like that. No symbols, no debug information. But it did have some strings, of course, because they should come up at the display. And we use that to trace back functionality that were interested to us. This is a setup menu that it features. Basically, you can enter this menu when you are powering the device, and you press the red button. It will allow you to configure different settings. For instance, the game type can be set to poker, blackjack single deck, or blackjack double deck. You can set the number of cards, time, date. If it's poker, the number of cards is set to 52. And this is then used to count the cards and make sure it's in line with the configured game. An interesting thing for us, though, is that it also allows you to configure the RNG. So we can reseed the RNG. And so the way it works, the RNG basically sources, the entropy is sourced from a timer. The shuffler basically features a crystal oscillator that runs at 11 megahertz, and it's configured by the firmware to run in the 8051 timer 0 mode. It's a 16-bit counter mode. Essentially, this interrupt's gonna get called every 245 microseconds. And inside of the routine, a timer tick variable is incremented each time. That variable is read by the function that creates the SID. It's read four times, and you create a uint32. Now, that initial SID is then used in a linear congruential generator algorithm with those values right there on the top. It seems to be pretty common. And the function getRandom then relies on that getNextSID function that we define, right? These are names that we define, of course. And then generate random deck, which is what we care, uses getRandom. So that's how we trace the functionality. And okay, so the shuffling algorithm. Basically, it's simple. Once you place the cards into the first compartment, based on the game's settings that were configured, the shuffler starts feeding the cards from the bottom of the deck to the shuffling compartment and starts counting them as well in this process, right? And the shuffling happens because the algorithm is, it will create an array of 52 positions, and of course there are random positions inside, right? And so in this case right here, we have an array that dictates that the first card, so the bottom card of the deck is going to be at position 34. The second from the bottom of the deck is going to be at position 48, and so on. The rest is just the state machine necessary to control the grippers and the movable platform that creates a gap so the new card gets fed in. So with that, okay, we understand more or less how the software works, the firmware. And there is because it's running with overall hardware, there's no really secure boot. There's no secure boot concept. And there's no GAT concept either. There's no way to determine if that machine was compromised. So if we just reflash the EEPROM or we just replace it entirely, the MC will just execute the code. With this, we can already see easy things we could do to aid in cheating. First thing will be to bypass the card count detection by disabling this logic altogether. The idea wasn't to create a new firmware for the Deckmate. It was just to understand enough so, hey, this can be done easier, right? Easily. And if we do this, then allows all types of cheating to be alive again. Essentially, you can keep a card from the deck or add an additional card, and then the attacker will have, the cheater will have a significant edge in the game. Something more interesting, though, is we can have, if we know some state of the deck, some partial knowledge, then we can leverage some, arranged deck orders, right? So because we know it starts from the bottom of the deck, and each position in that array indicates where that card should go, that in this example, for instance, if the dealer is corrupt and positions two aces at the bottom of the deck, with this array, which we can generate very easily if we control the firmware, we will be placing those aces at the top and at position 9, right? Which means that for a 9-player game, those cards are going to be dealt to the first player. And again, this doesn't have to happen like on every hand. This can be concealed by, for example, requiring the dealer to press the green button or the red button n times before this special deck configuration is triggered. And the last idea we had for Deckmate 1 was to have a false shuffle. It's essentially do not shuffle the deck at all. The array configuration that achieves that is the one shown in there. It's essentially the bottom card, the one that is currently at the bottom. It's going to remain at the bottom because we're saying position this card at position 51 from the top. The second from the bottom, position 50. So it's essentially no change. And this gives a significant advantage to someone that knows this, right? Because from the previous hand, that cheater knows the entire flop, the turn, the river, the hands. And so upon the dealer cuts the deck, he knows that those cards are basically dead, giving him a significant edge. And when this happens, it's interesting. You have to keep in mind that because we're actually working with a functionality, it's not that the shuffler is going to stop. It's going to keep working as intended. It's just that the grippers in this case are not going to kick in, but the shuffler is going to still make noises and such. So you're not going to be able to distinguish, hey, this didn't shuffle this time, right? All right. So now Ethan is going to cover Deckmate 2.
All right, hello. So yeah, moving on from the Deckmate 1, we also took a look at the Deckmate 2. Here we had a similar approach and similar goals, right? We wanted to understand general operation, understand RNG, and the shuffling algorithm. In this case, this is a 2-component machine. So there is a display module running Linux, and a control module, which is running QPC, sort of a lower-level embedded framework. Here's an architecture diagram. On the right, we've got the control board. This is responsible for actuating motors and moving belts, et cetera, actually performing the shuffling. And this communicates with the display module on the left over serial, over UART. The display module is responsible for interfacing the buttons and the display with the control board so that the dealer can operate the device. It also exposes Ethernet and USB, which Joseph discussed earlier. So this display board we looked at first. So this is actually an off-the-shelf Reach Technology touchscreen display dev board. It's running embedded Linux, as mentioned, and performs those functions. One of the first things we did is check out the exposed network attack surface. As Joseph mentioned, this is listening on both Ethernet and USB in certain configurations. And you can see here there were a number of services. Some were used during the operation of the external display, so this would include SSH and X11. The web server on port 80 is a configuration web server where certain aspects of the game can be configured, new card decks can be trained, etc. There were also these two services, Telnet and SMB, which did not appear to actually be in use on the shuffler, but were nonetheless exposed. We never identified functionality that used them, so yeah, they appear to just be unnecessary attack surface. All right, so we went over the network services, and at first glance, there didn't appear to be any easy way in. SSH and Telnet did require Linux login. SMB, there wasn't any exposed shares or attack surface there. The configuration web server did require authentication. We were provided originally a low privilege set of credentials that allowed certain configurations, but did not yet have access to anything higher privileged. So moving on from network, we needed a little bit more information about the system, so we looked to the hardware. The display module has an option of booting from either onboard NAND or an SD card via this jumper in the center of the board. So this can be used to select the boot device. The NAND flash is up at the top. This is what stores the actual shuffler firmware. And the SD card slot is on the right there. So essentially what we did was to create a bootable image via the Reach SDK, boot into our SD card via the jumpers, and then from there mount the onboard NAND flash and dump the original firmware image. So from there we were able to review the full firmware of the display board. We found a number of issues there. There's no real privilege separation implemented here. Basically all the services are running as root. It features a significantly outdated Linux kernel, at least on the version that we had access to. More importantly, though, there are weak hard-coded passwords for the system, in particular for the root user. This appears to us to be universal between all Deckmate 2 shufflers. And you can see on the right there, this is output from John the Ripper, and we were able to crack that root password in just under 10 minutes. Furthermore, there's no secure boot implemented on the Reach technology board and no file system integrity checking, so any changes to the kernel, file system, service binaries go undetected. There is a custom software update utility on the Deckmate 2 for shuffler-specific functionalities. We also reviewed this and identified a number of issues with it as well. There is weak authentication on the update. Essentially, the update images are encrypted and authenticated using the same key. So if that one key is compromised, an attacker can generate validly encrypted, validly signed update images. Unfortunately, we also identified that that authentication / encryption key is hard-coded and is universal to all Deckmate 2 shufflers and was available in clear text in a shell script on the system that was used as part of the utilities for performing software updates. So we were able to construct our own update packer and unpacker using this key and the logic that we reverse engineered from the update utility to be able to validly encrypt and sign firmware update images. Moving on to the web server, the pattern continues here. There were a few higher privileged credentials beyond the initial low privileged credential we were provided. These were all available within the web server service binary and do also appear to be universal. So we were able to pull 4 credentials out, and as far as we could tell, this gives us, the highest level of access available on that web server. So moving on to the control board. So we covered the display board. This is the control board. This is running on an NXP MCU. This is a sort of lower level processor. Again, here there is no secure boot implementation. And code read protection, which is a set of features specific to this processor family, which prevents reading out of firmware, prevents updating of firmware, and debugging, was not enabled. So The operating system for, not exactly an operating system, but the framework used on the control board is called QPC. This is a real-time embedded framework using the active object model of computing. Essentially, this is an asynchronous set of state machines that talk to each other. And most importantly, it's open source. So we were able to reference the implementation as well as example projects when reverse engineering the shuffler firmware. So as you can see here, on the far left, we have an example project, QPC open source example project. And we cross-referenced certain function calls which are commonly made in QPC projects, such as QActiveStart. What this does, the first argument to the function represents the active object for a particular functionality. So in the case of the shuffler, there is a rack object which moves the rack up and down. There are card reading objects for the camera. And so by matching our main function to an example project, we were able to identify 16 different active objects, including a few of particular importance, such as the shuffling algorithm and RNG. So again, the core functionality for a card shuffler is that it should be unpredictable. So we wanted to investigate the random number generation and answer a few questions. First of all, whether it's hardware or software. In this case, this is purely software RNG. The sourcing of entropy and seeding, also important if that seed can be predicted. Perhaps you can predict the outcome of a shuffle. And finally, what algorithm was in use for random number generation. I won't go into too much detail here. Essentially, what we found is the Deckmate 1 and Deckmate 2 use very, very similar methods of entropy sourcing. In this case, the timer runs a bit quicker, but it's essentially the same. That goes as well for the PRNG algorithm. This is a linear congruential generator using the same constants as the Deckmate 1. And we found it to be acceptably unpredictable based on our review. And again here, the shuffling algorithm is essentially the same as the Deckmate 1. In the case of the Deckmate 2, the physical mechanism is slightly different. So there are things referred to as slots that cards are placed into. But basically, an array is generated where the intended position for each card in the unshuffled deck is set. And then the card will be moved to that position when the cards are shuffled. We have an image here demonstrating this action. You can see on the left the elevator moving up and down, and you can see a number of slots where cards are being inserted. There's a total of 27, and 2 cards can be inserted into each slot for a total of 51 possible cards in a shuffled deck with the Deckmate 2. An important note here, Deckmate 2, because it features a camera, also supports something called sort mode. Essentially, this is used after a game is played to put the deck back in a known order. And this is done by reading each card as it moves past the camera, recording the rank and suit, and then placing that card in the appropriate slot based on the order desired by the dealer. So, cheating with the Deckmate 2. Our first idea here, based on everything that we had found, was to control the order of the deck, right? If you're walking up to a poker table and you can give yourself the winning hand, that's an easy get. But we did identify a few issues with this approach. Firstly, the dealer is almost always going to cut the deck in a professional setting, disrupting the intended order. Furthermore, deck orders that allow a cheater to consistently win are going to be very quickly noticed by casinos, card rooms, etc. And the cheater will be found out. Furthermore, there's some sort of stringent requirements as far as player seat, number of players, to ensure that the cheater gets the exact hand he's looking for. So we went searching for sort of a more interesting, more stealthy way to cheat, which Joseph touched on a little bit already. And this was to use the camera that's already recording suit and rank information to read the cards and transmit that information to us somehow. The benefits here is that there's no deck order modification, and that means the hands themselves won't be particularly suspicious. The deck cut can be accounted for based on input from the cheater or from an accomplice, which hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate. And finally, there's no specific seat or player count requirements for this technique. This is just sort of a summary of the vulnerabilities leveraged for this particular cheating scenario and for our proof of concept. And the equipment we used here was a Raspberry Pi Zero W, though smaller Bluetooth-enabled devices could be used as well, and an Android phone. So I've got this architecture diagram here of the Deckmate 2, which we went over previously. In this case, it has been modified to report card position information as well as rank and suit, which it was already doing. And we've implanted a custom UART listener on the display module, which consumes that information and then forwards that over either Ethernet or USB to our connected Raspberry Pi Zero. That then transmits the same deck order information to the mobile phone via Bluetooth Low Energy. And the mobile phone takes that card order data alongside the configuration supplied by the cheater or an accomplice to calculate the winning hands and allow the cheater to use that information to their advantage. So I think we would like to attempt the demo now.
There you go.
It works? Okay, I don't know.
Cool. Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, apparently Alt-Tab is a fail. So here we have our mobile application on the right of the screen, and we have our live webcam of this table. So we're gonna go ahead and have a cheater here at the table. And our device is already plugged in. It's communicating with the mobile app. We will shuffle a deck. And what's going to happen is this mobile app allows you to do a number of configuration options. So we'll go ahead and set up for 4 players. We'll say that the cheater is in seat 1, and we will say that he's position 0 from the dealer button, so he'll be under the gun with the next spot. And we will also mark it as the deck to be cut. And since the deck is going to be cut, we'll need to add some extra information. So, didn't you get it?
I don't know. We can try it. You want to run it again?
I don't know. Did you get it or no?
No, I don't think so.
All right.
Go ahead and run it one more time. Apologies.
Anyways, the point is that since in most settings the dealer is going to cut it, we need to have some sort of extra data to know the order again, because it's essentially a circular buffer. So you could do that with either your hand or the flop. The concept of you having a hand while you're in a hand, or you having your cell phone out while you're in a hand, is frowned upon.
Yep.
You get it?
Yeah, let's try it one more time.
Okay.
One more shuffle.
Jesus. Okay.
We got time.
The whole point is that the cheater should not actually have the cell phone in their hand while they're playing a hand of poker. So you would have an accomplice off to the side, they're watching the table, and they would see the flop, and then they could enter it into their device and then signal to the cheater if they're potentially good or not. The reason is that just because you have a poker hand does not mean that you're going to make it to the flop, right? So even if the cheater has the third best hand, they might still be the only one that's there. Are we good, finally? Good. Okay, thank God. Okay, so we will cut the deck. We'll deal out 4 players. We will burn and do the flop. So we have the 3 of spades, the 5 of hearts, and the 3 of diamonds. So Ethan should be able to tell us what the turn and river are going to be.
So the turn should be the 7 of hearts.
7 of hearts.
And the river should be the king of clubs.
So who won the hand? Yeah. We'll see the cheater was sitting with Jack 6, and he lost. He's at the very bottom. Which seat won?
The seat 4 won.
Seat 4. Let's see. Seat 4.
3 kind.
Had 3s. Yep. There you go. Cool. Hopefully that was worth the pain. And just really quick, I got like 20 seconds. So conclusions, right? They're fun. Basically, yeah, it was surprising some of the stuff we found, but we have high hopes that a lot of the stuff's going to be fixed and taken seriously because obviously these are used in casinos. Primarily, our research focused on poker, but similar shufflers are used in games like blackjack and baccarat. Due to games like blackjack, where a player could either hit or stand, it's a little bit more involved because you have to pay attention if they're taking more cards. But overall, cheating like this kind of affects the trust in players with the integrity of the game, and that's a major concern. We obviously recommend doing some sort of enclosure at the bottom of the table to restrict physical access to the ports. And we think gaming operators should try to leverage their relationship with the manufacturer to maybe implement some newer features like being able to disable ports completely if you're not using the features, etc. But we did want to quickly show this. Doug Polk, he's a famous poker player and also a gaming operator out of Texas with The Lodge. And there were some kind of cheating speculation things happening last year regarding shufflers, and he kind of did a Twitter thread about it. But there was one very important point that he said, which is just if you're in an environment where you think you might be getting cheated, if you have the dealer riffle the deck a few times, that should more or less be good, especially if cheating in this manner. So we just quickly wanted to say that because with poker, the saying is just always protect your hand. So we will be in the other room for questions, and in the next few weeks we will be releasing a very detailed white paper that covers all the internals and other stuff, so should be of interest to you.